Last class, we were trying to understand this question, why Socrates is known as father of philosophy. Now, to understand this question, we are supposed to understand what is philosophy, and then only we can say Socrates is a father of philosophy. What is philosophy? Fine. And we should also know who is a philosopher. Fine. So if we go by the general understanding of philosophy, the philosophy is the search for knowledge. Search for knowledge. Fine. Now, the next question is, why do we search for knowledge? Why should we care for knowledge? Why search for knowledge? Search for knowledge means to know something. Why there is a search for knowledge? Because we have intellectual curiosity. Fine. As a part of intellectual curiosity, we want to know many things. So, there is a search for knowledge. So, we want to understand who made this world. We want to understand what are the fundamental principles of this world, and so on. So, in this context, we can say that any knowledge is not philosophy. Fine. Philosophy is a specific form of knowledge. Now, to understand that specific form of knowledge which the philosophy is, to understand that specific form of knowledge which the philosophy is, we have to understand the difference between myth and knowledge, or philosophy. So, in a way, philosophy is a knowledge which can be separable from the myth. Okay? So, myth means stories. Fine. Now, in these stories, there is hardly a logic. You study about the stories, no logic, and mainly it is religion. So the development in the eastern part of the world has been in the field of religion, and in order to satisfy the intellectual curiosity, the people in this part of the world moved into the direction of religion. But if we look into the West, in the West, the tradition of rationalism developed. The tradition of rationalism developed. Fine. So, we will have to understand what is this tradition of rationalism. And on that basis, we can understand what is philosophy. Okay? So, in your copies, first of all, you write why Socrates is known as father of philosophy. I am repeating, why Socrates is known as father of philosophy. After this, you write, in order to understand this, we need to understand what is philosophy. Okay. So next is, right, philosophy is the search for knowledge. Philosophy is the search for knowledge. Now, why the search for knowledge? Write it down. Why there is a search for knowledge? So you can write that there is an element of intellectual curiosity in man. Next, write mode of knowledge. Fine. So write some people found their satisfaction in the knowledge given by religion. Fine. So the knowledge given by religion is not based on logic. Religion is based on faith. Fine. And these explanations are called as myths. So first of all, to understand the difference between knowledge, or to understand what is philosophy, we have to differentiate between the myth and philosophy. Okay? So what is the characteristic of philosophy? Philosophy is what? It is also a mode of learning. It is also a mode of knowledge. But what is its character? Fine? So, philosophy differs from religion because philosophy is based on logic. Means philosophy is based on reason. Fine? It means whatever explanations are given to me, that should not be imposed on me as a duty, but that should be told to me, or that should be convincing on the basis of reason. Fine. So, the tradition of philosophy developed in the Greek, and Greek tradition is known as rationalism or reason. So what was the worldview of the Greeks? The worldview of the Greeks was rationalism. Write it down. Right? What was the distinctive feature of the Greek thinking, right? The distinctive feature of Greek thinking was rationalism. Fine. Now, after that, let us understand this relation or the role of rationalism in the Western philosophy. So, in your copies, you write just the note. As a note, you write the role of rationalism in Western philosophy. Right? So, if we see the evolution, now pay attention and understand this. If we see the evolution of the West in intellectual terms, the evolution of the West in intellectual terms, what we will see? We will see the ancient times, the medieval era, modern era, and the contemporary era in the West known as post-modern era. Fine. And every age has its thought. Every age has its intellectual climate. Every age has its way of thinking. Okay? So, the ancient age in Europe was known as the age of rationalism. Age of rationalism. Why it is known as the age of rationalism? Because people tried to solve the problems of their life by the application of reason. Fine. So rationalism means people solving their questions by the application of reason. Fine. So in your copies also you can note down the evolution of the Western world in intellectual terms, in terms of the way of thinking. So the Greek era represent rationalism. Fine. Rationalism means finding the solutions to your queries in the logic or reason. Fine. So I am repeating one statement. Please hear this statement. Somewhere we will connect this thread. I am saying that Greeks were solving the problems of their lives not by the application, not through the religion or myths, rather than through the reason. Fine. So, rationalism is against religiosity. So, rationalism, or you can say the rationalists will not solve their problem through the religion. Fine. So they may believe in God, but they don't trouble God to solve their problem. So they go for a separation. It's not that in the Greek civilization people were atheist. It's not that they didn't believe in gods. There were many gods. But they have gone for the division of the sphere of religion and the sphere of social life. So for solving the puzzles of social life, they relied on rationalism. So rationalism can be linked to secularism. Rationalism can be linked to secularism or secularization. Fine. So you need to understand rationalism and secularism. Both are very, very important. Fine. So I will just understand, don't write. For analytical purposes, we divide the human life into two spheres. One is public and other is personal. Fine. So Greeks also kept God where in the personal sphere, and public life was based on reason. So this process, public life based on reason, we can call it as secularization of public sphere. This is very important to understand rationalism, secularism. It's important to understand the philosophy of Renaissance. So the beginning of secular state, the beginning of secularization of the public sphere, it starts in ancient Greece. Is this clear? So at times when you will read any book, you will find that rationalism and secularization is written together. Fine. Can you divide, just for analytical purpose, your personal sphere and your public sphere? So in personal sphere, you may be a follower of a religion, but in public sphere, suppose you are a member of parliament, suppose you are a district collector, so you have to work according to the reason, according to the logic, and not on the basis of religion. So this is called secularization. So we divide private and public. In public sphere, we go for secularization. So where does state fall? Is state fall in a personal sphere or a public sphere? So state falls in public sphere. In Greeks also, the state was not a theocratic state based on religion. Okay? Now, let us come to the medieval age in the West. Out of this discussion, it is very important that you understand the relation between rationalization and secularization. Okay? So solving the collective problems by application of religion and not by application of reason and not by application of religion. Now we are coming to the medieval world. Fine. So in medieval world, we have already seen that short story. In medieval world, what you see, secularization ended, rationalism also ended. So medieval world in the European history is known as age of religion. Fine. You can write that the medieval history in the Europe is known as the age of religion. Fine. And in the Western Europe, it is also known as Dark Ages. Dark Ages. Fine. And in medieval sphere, there was no secularization of public sphere. I am making this statement, secularization of public sphere. So first thing you should understand, what is public sphere. So one is my personal sphere, my family. Another is my public sphere. I may be a follower of a religion, but in a public sphere, I should not act on the basis of my religion. Fine. So secularization means when religion is rolled back and just confined to the personal sphere, and in public sphere means neither in the field of economics or market nor in the field of politics or governance, things will be based on religion. But in medieval period in Europe, what we have seen the end of secularization and the beginning of the age of religion. Beginning of the age of religion. So what happened was the influence of religion became all pervasive. Influence of religion became all pervasive. Religion started influencing even the public sphere. Fine. So in your copies you write, in medieval age, the influence of religion became all pervasive. Means presence of religion everywhere. Presence of religion everywhere. Religion is not limited to the personal sphere. Religion is also present in the public sphere. So what you say, in medieval age, religion emerged into the public sphere, and it is known as the Dark Ages. Fine. So means religion is present in politics. Fine. So what do we see? That even at present, the many societies in the East or many countries in the East are based on medievalism. Fine. Means where the public sphere is not based on reason, but the public sphere is based on religion. You can take the example of Iran. In Iran, the religion, like Iran is a theocratic state. In Iran, there is a democratically elected government, but Iran is a guided democracy, and in Iran, over the president of Iran prevails the verdict of the supreme leader of Iran. Another example can be Saudi Arabia. Fine. Another example can be Afghanistan under Taliban. So even in 21st century, certain societies exhibit the features of medievalism. Even you can say so about India also. In India also, religion's influence is all pervasive. Despite constitutional ideal of a secular state, in India, religion is very much present in the sphere of politics. And it is very natural because in Indian society is also a traditional society and a medieval society, though the constitution aimed at bringing the modernization. Indian constitution is called as transformative constitution because our aim is to build a modern society out of traditional society. And if you see the fundamental duties, it is mentioned that citizens are expected to develop the scientific temper. Fine. So, intermixing is primarily the feature of the medieval society. Medievalism has nothing to do with the year, age, or time. It is all about a mentality. In the Western world, they have overcome that, but in the Eastern world, that is continuing. Fine. So now, if we see the modern age in Europe, modern age in Europe, modern age is the product of certain movements in Europe which can be called as Renaissance, Reformation, and Enlightenment. So, what does this word Renaissance denote? The word Renaissance or Renaissance denotes revival or resurgence. Revival or resurgence. So, revival of what? Resurgence of what? So, the revival of the Greek tradition. What is there in the Greek tradition? I am doing it from the very beginning, the tradition of rationalism. So, what is a Renaissance philosophy? The revival of rationalism. The revival of rationalism means the ethos of Greek civilization. Fine. So, who is a father of Indian Renaissance? You can give the example of Raja Ram Mohan Roy. You can give the example of Sir Syed Ahmad Khan. You can give the example of Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. So what these people did, they challenged the tradition, they challenged the religion, they challenged the outdated customs and traditions. For example, Raja Ram Mohan Roy, Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar, under the influence of rationalism, they took steps to improve the status of women. Raja Ram Mohan Roy formed Brahma Samaj. Similarly, Sir Syed Ahmad Khan, he founded a magazine titled Tehzeeb-ul-Akhlaq. So they can be considered as the rationalists in Indian context. So Sir Syed Ahmad Khan founded a magazine. Title of the magazine was Tehzeeb-ul-Akhlaq, AKHLAQ. Tehzeeb means customs and traditions. Means he also attacked, he also appealed to reject the outdated customs and traditions, though he also had to suffer the criticism from the orthodox sections of the Muslims. Okay, so my idea to tell these things is so that you can understand what is Renaissance. And Renaissance is a revival. The revival of what? The revival of the Greek thinking. And what was the Greek thinking? The Greek thinking was based on rationalism. Okay, and the other thing that you see which led to the modern age, I was discussing what led to the modern age in Europe. First is Renaissance, which led to rationalism and humanism. Both are the Greek thinking. I will discuss humanism later on. Next, Reformation. What is Reformation? Reformation word is used for the religious reform movement in Christianity. Known as Protestant movement. Fine. So you must be knowing that there are two major sects in Christianity, the Catholic and the Protestants. The Protestants challenged the authority of the church in all sphere, and Protestants made the separation with the religion and the public sphere, and they held that religion belonged to the personal sphere. Religion is a personal matter. It is person's relations with the God, and there is no need of church. And this separation, this confinement of religion has also reduced the importance of the church, and the Reformation led to the re-emergence of secularism. So Western secularism is what? The separation between the church and state. So whenever rationalism will come, obviously secularization will come. I hope you have understood. So you can write this. Modern age emerged with Renaissance. So Renaissance represent revival. Revival of what? The revival of the Greek culture or thinking, means the Greek tradition of rationalism. Next is Reformation. Reformation means separation between personal and public sphere. Reformation led to the secularization of the public sphere. And that is why what you see that rationalization and secularization, they will come together. Now, why I am telling this, you can also relate that Indian society is a highly religious society. We have a large number of people who may not be literate, or they may not be educated in the fair sense of term, especially in terms of scientific knowledge. The influence of religion is all pervasive. The religion is also not separated from the state. And if you see that whenever or there is a huge role of religion in the elections, and hence from the very beginning there was a debate with respect to India. Can secularism be successful without secularization or rationalization of the society? So India was made a secular state from the very beginning. Though the term secularism was added by 42nd Amendment Act in 1976, but just because you will mention the term secularism does not mean that it is a guarantee for the success of secularism. Okay, so there are many scholars in India who always put a question mark on the success of the project of secular state. And what we see that gradually the nature of Indian nationalism, the narrative of Indian nationalism is also changing. Our present Prime Minister talks about New India, fine, where the nationalism is based on the Savarkar's concept of Hindutva. Now, many students were asking about the concept of nation. It is not so easy to define at this point of time. So, first of all, you condition your mind to understand these debates. So, my point was there have been scholars like Ashish Nandi, we will do in Indian section, who held that the chances of secularism successful in India are very rare. And instead of going for a secular state, India should promote toleration. So, what you want in Indian society is not secularism because that's not possible. What you should promote is the concept or the feeling or the value of toleration rather than secularism. Because secularism will be successful only when rationalism will come. So, secularism to be successful, we need to develop the scientific temper. To develop the scientific temper, you have to go for universalization of education and especially the universalization of the scientific education. Okay, so let us come back to the modern age. We see the beginning of rationalism and beginning of humanism. Humanism I will explain, and as a result of the separation or as a result of reformation, secularization. So keep these two things in mind, rationalization and secularization. Fine. What else happened? What else happened in the modern times? Enlightenment. So Enlightenment movement ended the dark ages. Enlightenment held that man is rational and man can take care of its interest. So, what is modernity? Modernity. Which societies are called as modern societies? There are many things, but two major things are rationalization and secularization. Fine. So these two processes of rationalization and secularization, these two processes, rationalization and secularization, fine, these two processes are called as modernization. So Pandit Nehru, B.R. Ambedkar, they were modernists and they wanted the rationalization and secularization of Indian society. So all traditional societies, all Eastern societies after independence went for the process of modernization. But the modernization process in these societies has been very lopsided modernization. Fine. So can you define modernization? Fine. So the Greek culture influenced the modern West or the modern Europe. But there is a difference. The difference is if ancient Greece is an age of philosophy and the medieval Europe is an age of religion, then modern Europe is an age of science. Age of science. Fine. So what is the difference in the science and philosophy? Lot of differences are there. When need will arise, I will discuss. But for the time being, just understand that science and science as well as philosophy. Fine. Science as well as philosophy. The common thing is, where do they meet? Science and philosophy. Fine. Where do they intersect? Where do they meet? Both are based on logic. But science is not just based on logic. Science is also based on experimentation and verification. Fine. So I hope you have noted down the features of modern age. The features of modern age are rationalism and secularization. And then you write that both these two processes are called as processes of modernization. Fine. And with the foreign rule and after independence, modernization and secularization or modernization of the Eastern world started. And then you write the basic difference in science and philosophy. What is a common thing, both based on logic? But science needs an additional criteria, and that is science is based on verification. Science is based on proof, verification, experimentation. Whereas philosophy is based only on logic, experimentation and verification is not necessary. Fine. So we can also differentiate the nature of the areas they study. So science studies the material facts, physical phenomena, material facts, because only facts can be verified. But philosophy goes for facts is fine, but philosophy deals with normative issues. Yeah, philosophy deals with values. Values means justice, liberty, equality. So this type of a thinking. So you will understand this difference later on. But philosophy and logic even led to the development of science. Fine. And then came the modern age. After modern age came the postmodern age in Europe. And in postmodern age, you can write, after the modern age in Europe emerged the postmodern age, right? After modern age in Europe emerged postmodern age. Fine. Now, postmodernism is a very complicated thing. We will study it in detail later on. But for the time being, you can write that we can trace the origin of postmodernism with the end of Second World War. Fine. So in Second World War, you must be knowing that Second World War ended with the use of the nuclear weapon. So nuclear weapon, our Prime Minister Pandit Nehru described satanic. Gandhi described nuclear weapons as the most diabolical use of science. So in postmodern age, people started realizing some of the negative impacts of modernity or science. And the revival of philosophy has taken place, and we see the emergence of postmodern philosophy. Fine. So postmodern age, I am not doing it in detail. Even modern age, I will again deal when we will start with Machiavelli and Marx, so that you can understand the modern age more deeply. For the time being, postmodern age, we will study more deeply with the help of the philosophers like Foucault, Derrida, Lyotard, Nietzsche. But for the time being, you can say dissatisfaction with the modernity and going back to philosophy. Okay, so what we see in Europe, we see fission, fusion, philosophy, religion, science, and different phases of history are emerging. Fine. So anyway, we need to come back to our original discussion, and that is philosophy. And I hope that you can distinguish between the philosophy and religion and philosophy and science. So we are going to discuss philosophy. So you must have understood that philosophy is based on logic or reason. Fine. So understand things on the basis of reason, and philosophy is the base which has also given rise to science, because in science you also include verification. Fine. So logic and reasoning. What does logic and reasoning denote? Logic and reasoning denote critical examination. Or critical evaluation. So sometimes students ask, like in answer, UPSC says critically evaluate, critically examine, how to answer these questions. And there is a misconception among the students that whenever it is written critical examination, you have to criticize. No, critical examination is not criticism. Critical examination is the rational or logical analysis of something. When UPSC says critically examine the ideas of Plato, it doesn't mean you have to criticize, because the method of philosophy is logical analysis. So critical examination, critical evaluation means you go for the rational and logical understanding of something. So if you will not do critical examination, you will end up believing in the traditions, and you will not go for the examination of such traditions, cross-examination of your views or your way of life. And without critical examination, it is not possible to go for improvement. So what West has done? West has done the critical examination of their beliefs, and they kept on understanding what is needed and what is to be rejected. But in the East, we do not have a critical tradition, as suggested by V.R. Mehta, that in India we find immense continuity. So certain traditions like caste system, that is continuing since the time of, or since ancient time, and we have been following it as a mandate of God without critical examination or the logical analysis. Okay, so philosophy means logic. Logic means whatever is given to us, don't accept it as it is, rather go for understanding the logic, understanding the pros, understanding the cons. Okay, So now philosophy develops with critical introspection or critical examination. So now in your copies, you write the pre-Socratic thinking, or don't write pre-Socratic thinking. First, just understand that the philosophy means logic. Logic means not taking anything for granted, rather going for a critical evaluation of anything and understanding things on the basis of logic. Fine. So now in Western philosophy has moved through the debate. In Western philosophy, we observe the debate. Fine. So philosophy moves by debate. Means I have one position, you have other position. So there is a debate into that. And whichever position appears logical, you accept it. So this type of debate, this type of deliberation was never a part of Eastern culture or Eastern thinking. The only exception was the Buddhist Sanghas. In Buddhist Sanghas or assemblies, there used to be the critical examination of the beliefs. Hence, in India, Buddhism can be considered as the rationalist tradition. Buddhism is India's rationalist tradition, and hence, in Buddhism, we see the criticism of caste system, because they may not have found any logical basis into it. So the mainstream tradition of India has been Hinduism. The heterodox tradition of India has been Buddhism. So Buddhism can be considered as our rationalist tradition. The moment you will be rationalist, you will start questioning. You will start logical reasoning. Okay? So in Western philosophy, whenever, like the entire philosophy, you will see the debates, and you can just note down the basis of debates. The basis of debates in Western philosophy. Okay? So in Western philosophy, it's not that there is an overlap. I'll say in Western philosophy, there is one debate between universalist versus particularists. Universalism means those who believe that there are some universal or foundational principles. Fine, you can write down the major debates in the Western philosophy. So first is universalism versus particularism. Fine. So universalism means what? Those who believe that there are some foundational principles. Means there are some ultimate principles. Universalists. Fine. Like you must have heard of Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Means there are certain rights which should be available to all. So that is called as universalism. Now the next is particularism. Particularism means those who believe that there is nothing foundational, every knowledge is relative. Nothing is foundational, every knowledge is relative. You must have heard about Einstein's theory of relativity. So according to this school, there is some universal truth. According to this school, There is no universal truth. Truth is relative. Truth is with respect to time and space. So there is a debate between foundationalists and anti-foundationalists. You can also call them particularists. Fine. So next is, you have written, in Western philosophy there is a debate between universalists and particularists. Universalist means those who believe that there are some foundational principles, and particularists who believe that no, every knowledge is relative, every knowledge is subjective. You can also call it as anti-foundationalism. Next, there are materialists and there are idealists. Materialists and idealists. Like later on, we will study Marx as a materialist. We will study Plato as an idealist. So what is a difference? The difference is in conception of reality. So you can write that in Western philosophy, some philosophers are materialists and some philosophers are realists. Fine. So materialists believe that matter is real. For them, this word is realists. For idealists, idea is real, not matter. Fine. So materialists and idealists. So some believe idea is real, some believe matter is real. So materialist means those who believe this world is real. Idealist means those who believe that the world of idea is real. Fine. So what is idea? God. God is an idea. Idea you cannot see. In your body, your physical body and your soul. Soul is an idea. We have never seen the soul, but we realize that the soul exists. Fine. Then there are debates between the idealists and realists. One word can have different meanings. So one comparison I did between idealists and materialists. Second comparison I am doing between idealists and realist. One word can be used in many forms. Fine. So for idealists, values, or you can say, first to understand realist. For realist, power. Realists are those who believe in power. For them, power is about, politics is about power. So realist and materialist is not same. Materialists say matter is real. Realists are saying that power is the source of happiness. Power is a source of good life. Whereas idealists who talk about ethics. Okay. Or you can say idealists talk about what should be. Realists talk about what is. So if we talk from this perspective and we talk about politics, those who say politics is an ethics, they will be treated as idealist. So in Indian context, we can give the example of Gandhi. And those who consider politics as power, you can give the example of Kautilya. So what is politics? Power. What should be politics? Ethics. So idealists are those who are concerned with what should be, whereas realists are those who are concerned with what is. And if we talk in terms of politics, so realists say politics is power, idealists say politics is ethics. Fine, so that is another point of difference. Then in Western philosophy, you will find individualists and collectivists. Fine. So those who are individualists, for them there is one sentence is used, part is prior. Part is prior to whole. For collectivists, we use the sentence, whole is prior to part. Fine. So part is prior to whole. This is another division in political philosophy. So whole means society. Part means individual. So some believe that individual has a priority over the society, whereas some believe that whole means society is more important than an individual. So we can sacrifice the rights of an individual for the sake of society. These are called collectivists. We can see those who say that no, individual cannot be sacrificed for the sake of society. These are called as individualists. Fine. So there is nothing to learn into it. Just know in the Western philosophy, we will find foundationalists versus anti-foundationalists. You can also call relativists. Then in Western philosophy, we will find materialists versus idealists. We can also find realists versus idealists. We can also find collectivists versus individualists. So the entire political philosophy will be primarily a debate in this context. Fine. So now you must have noted it down. These are the debates. Even if you have not noted it down, you can ignore it. It's all just about understanding. Fine. So now you just write pre-Socratic thinking. Yeah, pre-Socratic thoughts. Let's say pre-Socratic philosophy in ancient Greece. Fine. Pre-Socratic philosophy. So in ancient Greece, we see the beginning of philosophy, and first emerged the certain set of scholars who can be called as physicists. Right? The philosophy originated in the ancient Greece. The first set of philosophers have been physicists. Okay. So who are the physicists? Physicists are those. Who are the physicists? Physicists are those who study the physical property of universe. Fine. Who study the physical property of universe. Fine. So first came physicists. So basically, universe, everything in universe consists of two parts. One is a physical part. The other is a spiritual part. Physical part, our universe has two dimensions, the physical and spiritual. Though everybody may not be agreeing with the spiritual dimension, but we are just taking the generalistic view. Fine. So which is a physical part? Physical part is which is observable. Okay? Physical part is the part of the universe which we can observe. Okay? And which we can observe by using our sensory organs. Okay? So physical part is called observable part, which can be observed by our senses. Fine. For example, the physical part of universe, let us say the physical part of universe, let us say moon. But in Indian mythology, you also believe that there is a moon god. Fine. A spiritual part means God. A spirit word we use with a God. Fine. So this part can be understood through observation by using the senses. Senses means here I can use my eyes and I can see the physical part of moon. But as told to us, there is a moon god. In almost every culture, there will be some story about the moon god. In India, there is a festival known as Karwa Chauth for the moon god, and many other festivals may be. Fine. So the spiritual part can have anybody really seen the god? No. So spiritual part cannot be seen by using our senses or observation. So a spiritual part can be understood only by reason or contemplation. So those who have reason can understand the idea of soul. But those who do not have reason will not understand the idea of soul. So supposedly man has a reason, whereas animals do not have a reason. Fine. So animals only go for the satisfaction of their physical needs. But man also has the spiritual needs, which can be fulfilled only by reason or by intellect. Okay? So the universe has two parts, the physical and the spiritual. Physical part means this is visible. and this is invisible. Right? If something is not visible, it does not mean it does not exist. Fine? It exists, but maybe we do not have a vision to see this. Fine? So physical universe is a visible part which we see through the observation, which is called as empirical observation. So the physical part of the universe can be understood by empirical observation, observation through the senses. The physical part of the universe can be understood through what? You can write empirical observation. Whereas the spiritual part will apply the use of reason, spiritual part. So there is an idea of the moon god. So idea and matter. Fine. So now you write pre-Socratic thinking. Okay. Now in your copies you write pre So the first generation of the pre-Socratic scholars have been physicists. Fine. In the physicists, we can give the name of Thales, Anaximander. We don't require to remember any of the names. Fine. So physicists, Thales and Anaximander, and they were trying to understand the physical part of the universe. Okay, the physical part of the nature. Fine. And then in Greece, initially, we also see universalists. Physicists and universalists. So physicists were those who were studying the physical part of universe. Fine. And then within physicists, some were universalists. Universalists means those who were foundationalists. Those who were trying to understand the foundational or the fundamental principle of the universe, the foundational element of the universe. Fine. And out of these, for example, Thales said that everything in the universe is made up of water. Everything in the universe is made up of water. So in Hindu philosophy also, we have a concept of 5 elements, Panch Tattva. So initially there were philosophers who were physicists, who were studying the physical part of universe, as well as they were universalists. Universalist means they believed that there are some universal truths, there are some foundational principles. And for example, Thales said everything is in this world is made up of water. Fine, he held that water is the foundational element on everything that we find on or we find in this universe. Fine. You have understood foundational is? Fine. So which is the fundamental, universal, or the foundational element in this word? He said water. Okay. Now there were others. Some said air. Some said air. Some said fire. So this type of a philosophy was there. And as you know, the location of Greece, the Greece is located very near to the West Asia. So Greece is a place where the information of the various culture and that transformation did happen, and it is believed that there is a significant influence of the Indian philosophy on the Greek philosophy, and there used to be the visitors, and there has been the movement of ideas and not just the movement of goods and the people. Okay, so now after this came the second set of scholars from universalists who said that there are some essential or universal elements. And for example, that universal element is water. But when you see anything, in everything, you do not see water, it means the water changes into something, let us say X, Y, Z. Fine. So water has changed into something. Suppose this is a boat. Where do you see water? So after this theory came that everything is made up of some foundational principles, some people started understanding the process of change. Fine. So even if we accept water is an essential element, they tried to understand how elements changed the forms. Fine. So initially people understood nature, and while understanding nature, they tried to find the universalist features of or universal elements in the nature. Now, some scholars, for example, Thales said everything is made up of water. Then certain other, that Thales' argument could not satisfy the intellectual curiosity. So some people said that if water is the fundamental property of everything, but whatever we observe, we don't see water everywhere, it means water has transformed into something else. So they wanted to study how things have changed. Fine. So emerged the scholars of those who started studying the change. Fine. Now, out of the scholars who have studied change, one prominent scholar is Heraclitus. Heraclitus. And Plato is also influenced by Heraclitus. Okay. So what Heraclitus said that this world is the world of change. This world is a world of change. So besides that, there is some universal property. He also held that this world is a world of change. One fundamental characteristic of this world is everything changes. Fine? So this is a world of change and everything changes. And one of his famous statement is, you never step twice in the same water. Means the river is flowing and you have kept your feet in the river water, but your feet will never touch the same water again. So he said one of the property of universe is that everything is changing. Is this point clear? So you can write pre-Socratic scholars. In pre-Socratic scholars, first you write about the physicists, and in the physicists you write that they studied the physical part of the universe, and then some said that everything is made up of water or air. These are the fundamental elements, but these elements change. They change their forms. In this context comes Heraclitus. Heraclitus gave this thesis that the world in which we live is a world of change. There is nothing which will be constant. The only thing that is constant is change. Okay? Now, when you think that there is change, means there was something original and from where the change has happened. So came another philosopher whose influence also we will see in Plato, Parmenides. Parmenides. So Parmenides said that yes, this world is a world of change. But how do we recognize the change? It means this world also has some characteristic which is permanent. So if Heraclitus has highlighted the characteristic of change, Parmenides has highlighted the characteristic of permanence. Fine? So we will see Heraclitus and Parmenides later in the philosophy of Socrates as well as in the philosophy of Plato. Fine? Now, there have been philosophers who believed that maybe there is a truth beyond what we observe. Fine? And what do we observe? We observe the physical world. Fine? So some people believe that there can be a truth beyond what we observe. Fine? It means beyond the physical world. So there can be a truth which is beyond the physical world. So emerged the metaphysics. Means more than physics. So there is a truth or the word, some truth beyond this physical world. Fine. So emerged the concept of metaphysics, a very important idea with respect to the philosophy. Fine. So metaphysics means studying ideas, going beyond the world of matter. Okay. So one scholar we can point out here is Pythagoras. Right? So there is a huge influence of Pythagoras also, who emphasized on metaphysics. There's a huge influence of Pythagoras on Plato. And it is believed that Pythagoras had come to India, and from India, Pythagoras has taken the theory or the concept of soul. So normally in Western philosophy, we do not get the concept of soul, but in Plato, we get the concept of soul, which is taken from Pythagoras. And Pythagoras believed that universe is based on mathematical principles. Means with the help of mathematics, we can uncover the secrets of universe. So if we want to understand the universe, mathematics can help. So Plato's love for mathematics has its origin in Pythagoras. And what is mathematics? Mathematics is based on logic. Mathematics helps you to develop the abstract thinking. You can talk about algebra, you can talk about geometry, and this abstract thinking is very essential for the study of metaphysics. So the combination of these philosophers and these ideas has led to the development of the Socratic thinking. Fine. So we have seen the universalists, we have seen physicists, we have seen Heraclitus, who believes in change, we have seen Parmenides, who believes in permanence, and we have seen Pythagoras, who believes that the universe is based on certain principles which can be understood on the basis of mathematics. He believed that there is an essential harmony in the universe. Now, after this will come the second set of philosophers, whom we will say the philosophers of ethics and humanism. So I think for today, this is enough, and tomorrow we will pick up from here onwards. Till then, thank you.